Welcome back to Reviews with Elaine, because I have opinions. And today's opinions will be about Axiom's End by Lindsay Ellis. So, I'm gonna be completely honest, I've already recorded this video once, but when I recorded it, turns out I was in a very bad mood. And I feel like I was not really fair to this book in that video, so I'm just gonna re-record it. So Axiom End focuses on a young woman named Cora, who is the daughter of, like, this world's version of, like, Julian Assange. Niles, her father, runs this website where he publishes government leaks. And he becomes more than just a fringe figure when his website leaks a government memo that sounds an awful lot like the US government is hiding the presence of aliens on Earth. Cora just wants to, like, distance herself from the legacy of her father and live a normal life, especially considering her father abandoned the family to flee the attention of the US government by going to Germany. But when something that may or may not be an actual alien shows up in Cora's living room, she finds herself desperately trying to survive the conflicts between the government, truth, necessary secrets, and the end of the notion that we may be alone in the universe. Okay, so there are a few things that I want to talk about with this review, and one thing that I specifically do not want to talk about. We're going to start with the fact that I just find it utterly hilarious that I have literally only read 2 books by prominent YouTubers, this one and Hank Green's book, An Absolutely Remarkable Thing, and both of them have the basic premise of a queer young woman who feels like she is fucking up her life, accidentally ending up at the heart of first contact with an advanced alien race that has appeared on Earth for mysterious reasons. Now, I am not trying to say that I think either Hank Green or Lindsay Ellis were copying the other. I think it has more to do with the fact that A, they know each other, and B, it comes from the fact that the basic idea of a person accidentally finding themselves at the heart of first contact is a surprisingly good allegory / background for some themes that are very important to people who are very present online. And both Hank Green and Lindsay Ellis are people who are very present online. Because of that, these books do share some things in common. They both have themes of how humans react to world-altering paradigm shifts, like the internet was, but also themes of imposter syndrome and finding yourself thrust into a significantly more important role than you feel prepared for. But that being said, they are also drastically different books. An Absolutely Remarkable Thing is about identity and the balance of the need to spread your message to the world and the need not to speak over other voices. Whereas this book, Axiom's End, is entirely about truth as a human right, trust, and the impossibility of true deep communication. And An Absolutely Remarkable Thing takes place in this bright, shining world of media, fame, and the internet, whereas Axiom's Ion takes place on the run, off-grid mostly, in dark, hidden corners. I have read neither sequels, so I cannot tell you for sure, but at least in the first books, Hank Green's aliens stand to dramatically change human life, but primarily for the better, whereas Lindsay Ellis's aliens are a personal and existential threat to all of humanity. Which, if you know me, that might clue you in to my next topic of conversation here. When I started reading this book, I struggled to get into it, and I couldn't quite figure out why. It's really well written. Ellis is a solid writer with a really good grasp of how to use language and a very interesting story. But this book is just a little bit darker than books I usually like. This is not an optimistic view of America. I remembered when I picked up this book that I had heard Lindsay Ellis comment that she had felt the need to set this book in the latter half of the Bush administration. And it's absolutely abundantly clear why once you start reading it. The revelations about the war in the Middle East led to a sudden, very deep cultural distrust of the government. And this book takes that culture of distrust and runs wild with it. Which leads to one of the biggest themes in the entire book. The theme of who you can and who you cannot trust, and who you should distrust. We spend the majority of this book wondering if we can trust the government, if we can trust the aliens, if we can trust conspiracy theorists, Cora's aunt. And that inherently means that there are a good number of characters that we're supposed to go back and forth on whether or not we trust them. And this is something that I often struggle with in books. One of my least favorite types of characters is the character you're supposed to get to know and really like him and trust him, and then, oh, turns out he was secretly evil all along. And this book is not doing that. Every character has a lot more depth and a lot more understandable motivations than that, but it does occasionally verge on that spy thriller, ooh, can you trust this friend or not kind of vibe. And I think that's part of the reason I struggled so hard to get into the book. Because so much of the character interactions are about who to trust and can you trust these people. I felt like we didn't quite get to know them as well as we should have, especially early on. Like Cora, her mom, Luciana, Saul, and all the other human characters felt sort of incomplete to me. They felt like we didn't know anything about them, even though quite often we did know a buttload about them. Cora definitely developed more across the course of the book, but I still have no idea who some of these other characters really are beyond just the question of can I trust them. And I think part of the problem there was we didn't quite spend enough time with these characters before the world started crumbling around them. Like, we needed to see more of them in a state of normal before their lives devolved to just trying desperately to survive. And this in particular felt very much to me like the way characters are built in movies rather than the way characters are built in books. Because inherently in books, you have a lot more time to spend in just like showing flashbacks with characters interacting with each other, showing actual scenes with characters interacting with each other, showing people's inner thoughts about what's going on in that moment, showing conversations, and just pure unadulterated exposition. Whereas movies don't have time for that. So usually a movie character is built primarily from a few seconds of dialogue, whatever you see in the background when they're nearby, and whatever the actor is bringing to the character. So gestures, expressions, that sort of stuff. But books, because they don't have actors, don't have that innate connection you have to the human. So you sort of gotta spend more time getting to know them. And I feel like these characters, like, yeah, we learned a lot of facts about them, but somehow, I don't know why, it never quite coalesced into a character for me. Like, specifically with Cora. We know that Cora plays guitar. We know that Cora likes concerts. We know Cora is financially irresponsible. We know Cora studied linguistics before she failed out of college. And, like, all those things should come together to create an idea of a person to me, and somehow they didn't. And I think maybe that's because we don't see a lot of Cora in personal relationship moments. Like, we see her have a traditional conflict between a mom and an underperforming college dropout. We see her have a brief interaction with her younger sister who she loves. We see a very brief interaction with her aunt, and that's pretty much all we see before the shit hits the fan. We don't have Cora hanging out with friends. We don't have Cora with memories of romantic partners. We don't have Cora, like, going to the concerts. We don't see her there. And most of the focus on relationships in this book is the relationship with, the very broken relationship with her father and her budding relationship with Ampersand. And that just prevents me from really seeing the core of who she is, personally. But on that note, I do love the relationship between Cora and her alien friend. I love the fact that it feels exactly like a love story, without the sexual attraction. And, like, maybe I'm misreading it, but I didn't get anything sexual in there, and I liked that because it prevented it from feeling uncomfortable with this incredibly alien. And all of that is really cool and fun, seeing the, like, them connect across cultural boundaries, across species boundaries. It's an interesting interplay. And the trust themes also play into that, by the way, because, I mean, a love story, any love story where the conflict is going to be internal, the conflict comes down to trust. Can you trust your partner or not? And this is exactly that. It's just a bit more alien and dangerous than you usually see in a rom-com. But overall, this was a really cool mirror to the traditional found family story, Beauty and the Beast story, and all sorts of fun themes there. And on that note, I do want to say I think Ellis did an absolutely perfect job of balancing the alien to the familiar in her aliens. Ampersand is both visibly very alien, while also expressive enough that our characters can understand him. He acts inhuman while also maintaining motivations that we as an audience can understand. He's got beautiful, huge, expressive eyes and spider hands. Like, he's a really good balance. He's a character we can empathize with, but is alien enough that he can feel scary when it's necessary for him to feel scary. And I know that's something Ellis has thought deeply about because I have watched her YouTube videos where she discusses the use of visual aliens in media. And that finally brings me to the one thing I do not want to talk about. I am not going to dissect or majorly discuss the canceling of Lindsay Ellis. I'm not going to talk about the tweets. I'm not going to talk about her departure from YouTube. All I'm going to say is that I liked her videos. I am a subscriber to her to this day, and I don't always agree with her opinions, but I don't believe in making perfect the enemy of good. And that's all I'm going to say about that. I don't think it's pertinent to the rest of the discussion of the book. But going back to the book, I will admit I'm still a little bit ambivalent about this one, though having given it about a week after I originally recorded the video in a very, very, very bad mood, I like it a lot more in retrospect than when I finished it. Like, when I finished it, I was very ambivalent, and now I'm a little bit more like, no, it's definitely good. It's still sticking with me. I very much enjoyed it while I was reading it. I'm still thinking about it, and I'm still having fun thinking about the world, story, and characters. It was just while I was reading it, every single time I set it down, I struggled to convince myself to pick it back up. I never wanted to DNF it. Like, I was not considering putting it aside and just being done with it. But I kept wanting to write instead of read, or paint instead of read, or sew instead of read, or do the damn dishes instead of read. And I think part of that was my mood at the time, but I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that it is a bit heavier of a book. There is a lot of negativity that you have to get through in this story. And whenever I find books like that, and whenever I'm reading books like that, it takes me a bit more energy to get into it. This is still a really interesting book. I think it's very well written, and I think that overall my opinion is this is a pretty good book, even though when I finished it, it wasn't actually my favorite. So I just needed to give it a little bit of time, I think.